Now more than ever, Lowe's knows you don't just want a low price, you want the lowest price. And with our lowest price guarantee, you can count on us for competitive prices on all your home improvement projects. If you find a qualifying lower price somewhere else on the same item, we'll match it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Price match applies to same item, current price at qualifying retailers. Exclusions and terms apply. Learn how we'll match price at lowes.com/lowest price guarantee.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and T-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/SXM podcast and use code SXM podcast for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/SXM podcast and use code SXM podcast at checkout.
Nats Chat is brought to you by Walters. Walters is the best sports bar in Navy Yard, located just across the street from Nationals Park. Also a great place to check out if you're headed to Audi Field.
Make sure to check out their self-pour beer wall and unlimited TVs.
Here's the set. Long hold for Flaherty, and just barely gets it off, and a swing and a line drive into left center field, a base hit. Abrams scores. Thomas held up, now around third, coming in to score. The Nationals still have the 5-0 lead. Now the pitch swung on, hit in the air to deep left. This is way back, and going, and gone. Goodbye. Back-to-back home runs for the Cardinals, and the Cardinals have taken the lead with 4 runs home here in the top of the 5th, and nobody out. It's now St. Louis 6 and Washington 5.
3-1. Swinging a line drive to center field. Robles playing deep. It's going to dunk in front of him for a base hit. Scoring from third is Nootbaar. Arenado scoots over to third, and it's 8-5 Cardinals. Wilson Contreras picks up his 29th RBI of the season.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Tuesday, June 20th, 2023, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is at Nationals Park. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. You know, Mark is a big Phoenix Suns fan. I'm a big Wizards fan. If you, during this installment of the podcast, notice like an underlying tension between us, it's because my Wizards are trading Bradley Beal to his Suns for pennies on the dollar, and because the son of Bradley Beal's agent is the CEO of the Suns, in a major conflict of interest. Don't get me started on that, although that might make for a more pleasant conversation than what happened with the Nats on Monday. The Nats blew a 5-0 third-inning lead in what ended up being an 8-6 loss to the St. Louis Cardinals at Nationals Park in Game 1 of a 3-game series. The Nats now have lost 15 of their last 19 games. The Nats now are 27-44. That is the worst record in the National League. Coming up later in the show, a special treat, our own Tim Shover's conversation with Bob Kendrick. He is the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Bob's going to tell us about an all-time great player, Oscar Charleston, who actually at one point played for the Homestead Grays. But yeah, Mark, big-time blown lead by the Nats, a rough outing for Josiah Gray, a Nats offense that largely went silent after a great first 2 innings, and yet another Nats loss in a pretty bad stretch right now.
Well, if Bradley Beal helps lead the Suns to their first ever NBA title, I think it's all worth it, and I don't care about conflicts of interest or any of that. But I guess that's not what you really want to talk about here today, no?
Well, we can talk about it. I mean, it might be more fun than this Nats conversation, but I don't think that that's what people tuned into.
All right, I guess we'll talk Nats. You know, this is frustrating now. We're in a stretch here where it doesn't seem like anything can go the right way for them. And on the days when they pitch, they don't hit and they lose a game 4-2. On a day when they bust out of the gates, 5-run lead, Josiah Gray on the mound, what more could you ask for? No, they still find a way to lose that game. There is nothing going right for this team right now. There may be some individuals doing good things. There may be moments within games that are encouraging, but it's hard to look at the end result and not be incredibly frustrated. Not that you and I and everybody else didn't understand. This is still a rebuilding team, and there were going to be ups and downs, and I don't think we're shocked by that, but it's just disappointing because it was only a couple of weeks ago. It felt like they had actually turned a corner where we were talking about they're winning games about half the time, and the games they lose are very competitive, and they just need to find a way to finish them off. Well, and now in this stretch, it feels hopeless very often for them, no matter the opponent, whether it's the Dodgers or Braves, the good teams they're playing, or in this case, the Cardinals, who are one of the worst teams in the National League, believe it or not. this year. So I think that's what makes it frustrating more than anything, is that what happened to all that goodwill, all those positive direction that it seemed like these guys were going just a few weeks ago. It feels like it's all gone here in the span of, 2.5 weeks.
Well, we preached at the start of the season to, as best you can, divorce yourself from the outcomes of these games, because the rebuild, certainly in this season, is far more about individuals doing well, potential building blocks doing well, than the rebuild is about wins and losses. But I think one of the really tough things about this stretch for the Nats right now is that a decent number of the building blocks are not doing so well. C.J. Abrams had a good day on Monday, so that was good, but he overall is not doing well. Keibert Ruiz overall is not doing well. And we have the likes of Josiah Gray and Mackenzie Gore now in these kind of weird places of those guys are not doing as well as they were earlier this season, kind of teetering a little bit. And with Josiah Gray lately, and we've been talking about this, the results have maybe been okay, but the process has been troublesome. And on Monday, what you got was a game in which the results were not okay. Josiah Gray had maybe his worst outing of the season in this game on Monday. And understand who the Nats were playing on Monday. The St. Louis Cardinals are one of the worst teams in baseball this season, one of the biggest disappointments in baseball this season. So Josiah Gray on Monday, 6 runs in 5 innings. He gave up 9 hits, 2 home runs, a triple, a double, and 5 singles. Now, he did have 6 strikeouts versus 1 walk. He did throw a pretty good number of strikes, 102 pitches, 64 strikes versus 38 balls. So actually, the peripherals for Gray on Monday weren't so bad, but the giving up of 9 hits was bad, and the giving up of 6 runs in 5 innings was bad. Top of the third, Gray allowed 2 runs. He gave up a leadoff single by Paul DeJong to center field, gave up a stand-up RBI triple by Tommy Edman to deep center field to cut the Nats' lead to 5-1. Center fielder Victor Robles, off initially coming in on the ball, ended up seeing the ball bounce off his extended backhanded glove while leaping on the warning track. And then Gray gave up a 1-out RBI single by Paul Goldschmidt to center field to cut the Nats' lead to 5-2. Top of the 5th, Gray allowed 4 runs, all of which came over 4 hits to begin the inning. 3 of the hits extra base hits. Leadoff double by Paul DeJong down the right field line. Gray gave up a single by Tommy Edman to right field, despite him having been down at 1.02. And then came back-to-back home runs. Gray gave up a game-tying 3-run homer by Brendan Donovan to right field to tie the game at 5, and Gray gave up a solo homer by Paul Goldschmidt to left field for a 6-5 Cardinals lead. This was a rough one for Josiah Gray.
And it's because primarily the old bugaboo for him, the home run, has come back. Remember, all throughout the first 2 months of the season, we said, hey, he's done a great job of flipping the home run totals from last year. Can he keep that up? Or is this going to become a problem again come summertime? And you know what? It has become a problem again. 6 homers allowed now in his last 4 starts. And these were costly home runs. There are solo shots every once in a while that you say, okay, you live with it. These were bad home runs at a bad moment in a game that was right there for them, that they were in control of, and Josiah Gray gave it right back to the Cardinals. The home run to Donovan on a fastball in, and then seconds later, the home run to Goldschmidt on a hanging curveball. And, that part of it's troubling because we are seeing a return of really what was his biggest issue last year. The other part of this that's troubling to me is the first 2 innings, he cruises through them, 30 pitches, 19 strikes. They give him a 5-run lead. What do you want to do after that? Throw strikes, get quick outs, maintain that lead. And he said that's what he was trying to do. The problem is he did not do a good job of it. Over his final 3 innings, he threw 72 pitches. That is astronomical. And while there was only the 1 walk, like you said, there were a lot of deep counts. He was falling behind, getting into bad counts, and having to put pitches over the plate that were hit quite hard in a lot of those cases. So I think that's the discouraging part. Last week in Houston, he gave up a couple of homers. He still managed to get through 7 innings. And we said, hey, you know what? That's actually a pretty good sign from him. No walks, 7 innings, kept the pitch count down. That's where you say the process, you're excited about the process, even if the results were not great. In this one, I'm troubled by the process as well. If you had told me after 2 innings that one of these 2 starters was going to reach the 7th inning, I would have said it's Josiah Gray no matter what. And no, instead it was Jack Flaherty who reached the 7th inning, and Josiah Gray was knocked out after the 5th, already over 100 pitches.
Working backwards, here now are your final lines for Josiah Gray over his last handful of starts. And, final lines aren't always all telling, but I think in this case they are. 6 runs in 5 innings on Monday, 4 runs in 7 innings in the previous start, 1 run in 5 innings in the start prior to that, although he in that start issued 4 walks and issued a staggering 4 wild pitches, 4 runs in 5 and a third innings in the start prior to that, 2 runs in 4 innings in the start prior to that, 1 run in 5 innings in the start prior to that, but he in that game issued a staggering 6 walks. There's been a lot to sort of harp on lately with these Josiah Gray outings. Either the outing isn't good from a run prevention standpoint, or the outing maybe is all right from a run prevention standpoint, but you see things that are troublesome. 6 walks, 4 walks, and 4 wild pitches. Just things that don't sit right. So, he's a young pitcher. It's not linear in terms of the progress. But here's something to consider. Josiah Gray this season, first 10 starts, ERA at 2.65. Josiah Gray now, over his last 5 starts, ERA of 5.81. For the last month or so, he's kind of pitching the way that he was pitching these last 2 seasons. And that's obviously not what you want. And, I hate to bring this up, but I remember mentioning this earlier in the season. Eric Fetty the last 2 seasons over his first 9 or 10 starts was good. And then things fell off. Well, here you have now Josiah Gray this season. First 10 starts, good. ERA 2.65. Now, since then, falling off. I'm not saying he's Fetty. I'm not saying this is going to continue. I sure hope that it doesn't. But, you do wonder about that. Like, it's one thing to pitch well over, say, 10 starts in a season. It's a much different story to do so over, 25, 30 starts in a season.
And that's why these next few starts prior to the All-Star break, I think, are huge for him. Can he flip the switch back? Can he rediscover what he was doing well earlier in the season? Or does he let this compound on itself and all of a sudden he goes into the All-Star break with an ERA over 4? And we have a very different feeling about how this season is going for him. I think it's a good test for him. We've seen him tinker with a lot of different kinds of pitches. He threw 6 different types of pitches in the first 2 innings alone in this game and was using them throughout. He's got to figure out what works for him, what doesn't work for him, how to be in the strike zone like he has been the last 2 starts, but effectively in the strike zone. It's not good enough just to put the ball over the plate, especially when you get hit as hard as he did in this one. So there is some real stuff for him to work on, and I think this is an important test for him, not just as it pertains to trying to win a few games or lower the ERA before the All-Star break, but to really show that he can make adjustments, see what he's doing wrong, improve upon that, and leave a much better taste in everyone's mouths as they head out for the All-Star break in 3 weeks.
Right before the end of the Nats season in late September, Bruce Springsteen is coming to Nationals Park. If you're trying to find tickets to the concert, check out the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code NATSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code NATSCHAT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Hey guys, it's Al Galdi for Window Nation. Well, we all know what summer means. Summer means baseball. Summer usually means more home runs in baseball, but summer also means heat and humidity and your energy bills being rather high due to your air conditioning working extra innings. It is time to beat the heat with Window Nation's summer sale. Save thousands of dollars with an outstanding offer. No money down, no payments, and no interest for 2 years. Plus, Window Nation will give you 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy. All you have to do is call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Increase the value of your home by up to $12,000. Hey, make your neighbors jealous. Who doesn't want to do that? Again, the Window Nation summer sale. No money down, no payments, and no interest for 2 years. Plus, 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy. And this goes for any style of window. from Window Nation. 866-90Nation or visit windownation.com. That's 866-90Nation or windownation.com. And make sure that you tell Window Nation that Al Galdi sent you.
Hey Nats Chat listeners, here to tell you about Bird Dogs, the world's most comfortable pants. Bird Dogs make you look good. Bird Dog shorts also do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They also fit better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Go to birddogs.com/pool and enter promo code POOL, that's spelled POOL, for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/pool for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, we promise you.
18 out of 66 for the year, 4 doubles, 2 homers, 11 knocked in. A swing and a line drive into right center field, a base hit. This is going to score both runners. Candelario in easily from third. Here comes Meneses in to score on a line drive base hit into right center field. Play back by Lars Nootbaar. Corey Dickerson with a 2-run single, and the Nationals put the crooked number up here in the bottom of the first inning. It's Washington 3 and St. Louis nothing.
So Josiah Gray on Monday was not good. Also not good on Monday was the Nats offense off a great start to the game. The Nats over the first 2 innings scored 5 runs. The Nats over the final 7 innings scored a mere 1 run. The Nats for the game totaled 11 hits. 8 of the 11 hits came over the first 2 innings. We have seen this before. The Nats can actually get off to really good starts to games, but then the offense can go silent. And in a lot of ways, that's what happened on Monday. But I think what sticks with me the most from this game, from a Nationals offensive perspective, is the Nats running themselves into multiple outs. And, when this was happening, the Nats were, for the most part, leading. And so you say to yourself, okay, I mean, that's not the end of the world, but boy, I sure hope that the running into outs doesn't come back to bite the Nats. And sure enough, it did. So Corey Dickerson, he in this game, 1 for 4 with a good 2-run single. Dickerson in a Nats 3-run first, a 2-out first pitch, 2-run single to right center field for a 3-0 Nats lead, although he then was thrown out in his attempt to advance to third base on Dominic Smith's 2-out single to right field for the 3rd out. Luis Garcia, so he had an interesting game on Monday, 1 for 3 with 4 RBI. He had a 2-run single, an RBI sac fly, and an RBI groundout. Kind of an odd composition for a 4 RBI performance. Garcia in an Nats 2-run second, a 1-out 2-run opposite field single to left center on a 1-2 pitch for a 5-0 lead. But he then was thrown out at second base in his attempt to stretch the single into a double. This was kind of interesting. He overslid the bag in sliding around the initial attempted tag by the Cardinals second baseman Nolan Gorman. Garcia initially was ruled safe, but the Cardinals successfully challenged the play.
Garcia heading for second, the throw there. He gets around the tag and he's safe.
I think he's probably going to be called out here.
Did his hand come off to celebrate?
The call is overturned. The runner's out.
And of course, if the Nats in a game made multiple outs on the base paths, one of those outs surely had to have been made by Victor Robles. And yes, that did happen on Monday. Robles in this game, 1 for 4 with a double. Bottom of the 4th, a 1-out first pitch double on a chopper down the left field line. But he then got doubled up at second base on a 1-out first pitch, 3-6 line-out double play off the bat of C.J. Abrams. The Robles out was a little tricky because Abrams scorched that ball. But still, that's not an out that you need to be making, and yet that out was made. You had the Dickerson out, the Garcia out. What'd you make of what happened on the base pass with the Nats?
So in the moment, I did think to myself, boy, that might come back to haunt them. They had a chance to knock Flaherty out, to deliver the knockout blow early. They were all over him. At one point there, they were 8 for 10 offensively against Flaherty, and yet they had made 4 outs. One of them was a sac fly, and then 2 of them were on the bases. So they really only get hit into 1 legitimate out at that point. So there was an opportunity. Yes, the 5 runs are great, but there was an opportunity to really deliver the knockout blow. And so I didn't love that part of it. Now, I asked Davey about this after the game, and he actually said that those 2 in particular don't bother him a lot.
I don't mind those at all.
Because that was a case of being aggressive and trying to take an extra base on hits and things like that. So he didn't really take issue with those. And the Garcia one, like you said, he actually did a great job avoiding the tag if he had just held on to the base it would have been fine in the end, and we'd be complimenting him for a great slide. Dickerson, I didn't love just because this is a guy who is not a speedster, and he dealt with an injured calf. And so I don't know that you're trying to force the issue with Corey Dickerson to try to take an extra base. And again, that ended an inning that could have kept going and produced more runs. And the one that Davey had more of a problem with was the Robles one in the fourth, because he said, line drive, if you're a base runner, you just have to freeze. Don't even assume that the ball is going to get through. Now, 109 miles an hour off the bat of C.J. Abrams. So I'm not as upset. That felt like one of those, man, what are you going to do? He scorched that ball. Robles is thinking, I'm going to score on it. It happens, that kind of thing. But I did think, especially the first two, that there was a chance it was going to come back to haunt them. And the job that Flaherty did after that, I just talked about with Josiah Gray going from 30 pitches in 2 innings to 102 in 5. Jack Flaherty's at 46 pitches after the second inning. He made it all the way into the 7th, and he never even reached the 100-pitch mark. And what does that tell you?
That's remarkable. We need to stop with any outs being made on the base paths by Corey Dickerson. Remember, he got thrown out on an attempted steal a few games ago and what may have been a botched hit and run. And then in this game on Monday, he gets thrown out trying to advance to third base. Corey Dickerson is a big, bulky guy, not known for his speed. Like you said, he had the calf injury earlier this season. Enough with Corey Dickerson making any outs on the base pass here. But the Nats, to their credit, did score 5 runs over the first 2 innings. I mean, you ultimately, in a game, score 6 runs. You really should win the game, no matter when you score those runs. Lane Thomas, another good game for this guy. 2 for 4 with 2 doubles, a hit by pitch, and a stolen base. He and the Nats 3-run first had a leadoff full count double to left field. He and the Nats 2-run second had a 1-out double off the left field warning track. And Thomas and the Nats 1-run 7th, a 1-out hit by pitch, and a steal of second base on an uncontested double steal by the Nats. So in every run-scoring inning for the Nats on Monday, Lane Thomas was a factor. His team-leading OPS for this season now is at .834. His slugging percentage for this season now is up to .493, as again, he is winking at a slugging percentage of .500. It's funny, Kevin Franzen on the MASN telecast of the game talked up Lane Thomas as an all-star candidate. We certainly have had that conversation on this podcast, but I feel like the conversation is changing. A few weeks ago, it felt like, okay, Josiah Gray or Mackenzie Gore. If the Nats are going to have one all-star, probably would be one of those two guys. And then Lane Thomas was kind of like on the periphery. I think the conversation is changing with what's happening with Gore and Gray and what's happening with Thomas. I think right now you can make a very compelling case that Lane Thomas is the most deserving player on the Nats to be an all-star this season.
Yeah, if the vote was today, I think I would give it to Lane, just based on who was the most deserving, who's been their best player on the team. I think it's Lane. Now, as we discussed, outfield can be a tough place to crack. There's going to be a lot of competition there, and so that's why maybe Jeimer Candelario, with less competition at third base, could force his way in. But I felt like Josiah Gray was going to need to keep himself in the top 10 in ERA in the league. He's not there anymore after this one. He's going to need a nice turnaround the next few starts to get there. Mackenzie Gore would need a couple of big games, I think, as well. High strikeout total games, lower the ERA a little bit to put himself in the conversation. There was a point we talked maybe Hunter Harvey or even Kyle Finnegan. It's not happening with them with enough consistency. And by the way, those guys haven't pitched in a while either. Finnegan came into this game, but they were trailing, and Harvey hasn't pitched since Houston. So yeah, right now, if I had to pick somebody, I do think Lane Thomas is most deserving. And we keep saying it, but it's just nice to see this continue. You never really know, can he sustain it or not? Each passing day that he does it is a good sign that this is who he can actually be. I really liked that. And that first inning, leadoff double, and it was a hustle double that he forced his way there. He takes third on a wild pitch, and he put himself in position to score on a sac fly. It's exactly what you want from a leadoff hitter. Another double in the second. And then we talked about the bad base running. I do want to mention the 7th inning, double steal by Abrams and Thomas. Uncontested double steal by the Nationals, not against the Nationals. How many times have we talked about them giving up uncontested stolen bases?
Here's the pitch where the runner's going. It's low and outside and no throw. It's a double steal. So how about that? The Nationals, who are not normally aggressive on the base pass, pull off the double steal on the first pitch from Cabrera.
This was a great job by the two of them to read that, get the good jump in a game that was still competitive, and there was a chance there for them to put something together in the 7th and flip that game back in their favor. It wasn't those two guys' fault. They just couldn't drive them in after that. But that was a nice moment to see them be aggressive and smartly aggressive to take those 2 bases with the Cardinals completely unaware of what was going on.
Was very good to see that. Lane Thomas now this season in the first innings of games, I love tracking this, he has an OPS of 1,227. The guy has been otherworldly in first inning plate appearances this season. Batting average 457, on base percentage of 510, slugging percentage of 717. He has been one of the best first inning batters in baseball this season. And I do think that there's a good amount of value in that. Obviously, you want to protect leads, like 5-0 leads after 2 innings, but getting those leads is good, and Lane Thomas helps you do that. Good to see Jeimer Candelario be back in the lineup for the Nats on Monday. He was out there as the Nats starting third baseman and number 3 batter, returned from a 1-game absence caused by a right thumb bone bruise. He went 2 for 4 with a couple of singles. And nice to see C.J. Abrams, who, as we have discussed, has been reeling as a batter, actually get on base 3 times on Monday. He went 2 for 3 with 2 singles, a walk, and a stolen base. He had a good plate appearance, in particular in the 2-run second, a 1-out single to right field, despite having been down in the count at 1.12. He had that aforementioned 109-mile-per-hour liner. I thought it was notable, Davey, during his post-game session with you guys, singling out Abrams for having a good day. Man, you talk about someone needing to have a decent offensive day. Abrams certainly needed one.
Yeah, he did, and it was good to see him get on base in a variety of different ways. You said a good quality at bat in the second, drawing a walk, something he doesn't do a whole lot. In the 7th, beating out an infield single. In the 9th, and then the best contact he had all day, and it's too bad that he wasn't rewarded for it. But if he keeps doing that, he will hit pay dirt more often than not. You're not going to hit a ball 109 miles an hour that often into outs. So whatever he did in that bat, stick with it. A good day for him, and you're right, he needed one like that.
Nats bullpen on Monday. 4 Nats relievers combined to allow 2 runs in 4 innings. Jordan Weems, another impressive outing. He's had himself a good last few days here. A perfect top of the 6th with 2 strikeouts. Then did come Carl Edwards Jr. He in the top of the 7th allowed 2 runs on 2 walks and then 2 singles for an 8-5 Cardinals lead. I mean, again, the Nats were up 5-0. The Cardinals then scored 8 unanswered runs in this game. And specific to Edwards' appearance, the second walk and the 2 singles all came with 2 outs. Edwards threw 30 pitches, just 15 strikes versus 15 balls. Then we had Chad Kuhl, and I was fascinated by this appearance by Chad Kuhl. So first of all, we're seeing a lot of Chad Kuhl these days, not so much a Hunter Harvey and Kyle Finnegan, but Kuhl in this game, a scoreless top of the 8th, despite issuing a walk and a hit by pitch. He threw 17 pitches, 6 strikes versus 11 balls. That's hard to do. You don't see that often. A guy throwing nearly twice as many balls as strikes without giving up a run. So I don't know if we should be impressed by Kuhl, or we should be shaming Kuhl for what he did, but that was bizarre, the outing that he had. And then, like Mark said, we did see Kyle Finnegan, a Kyle Finnegan sighting, a perfect top of the 9th in just his 5th appearance in a game this month. I mean, we just are not seeing much of Finnegan or Harvey right now, but some things to think about with this Nats bullpen off what went down on Monday.
Well, and this was one of those cases, and we've talked about this. They're down 2 runs in the 8th inning. Game is still potentially there for the taking. And we know that Davey's not going to go to his top relievers, generally speaking, in that kind of spot. But the fact that Harvey and Finnegan both had not pitched since Thursday in Houston made me pause and say, should you just throw them both out there? 1 for the 8th, 1 for the 9th. Try to keep the deficit where it is, and maybe you've got a comeback in you. So instead he goes to Kuhl, and they got away with it because they didn't score any runs. But like you said, not a real clean inning at all. And I think David was probably spooked at the idea of putting him back out there for a second inning after that. So now you do use Finnegan, and he keeps the deficit there, and it still didn't work in the end because they didn't do anything offensively. But Hunter Harvey has not pitched now since Thursday, and I felt like maybe this was the time just to push that button and say, hey, yeah, we're down 2 runs. Let's try to clamp this thing down and give ourselves the best chance possible. Let's go Harvey in the 8th, Finnegan in the 9th. You know, I get why he doesn't do that. It's not some egregious mistake, anything like that. If they are in a position to win on Tuesday, you want to have him fresh and available. But given the way they've been used or haven't been used here in recent days, I felt like that might have been the time to go ahead and try something like that.
You can justify all of Davey Martinez's bullpen deployments lately, right? Like that you can understand what he was thinking each time he put in a specific player into a specific game. But when you take a step back and you say, okay, how come Chad Kuhl now has pitched so much over these last few days and Hunter Harvey hasn't pitched at all? How come you didn't use Kyle Finnegan at all in the previous series, and then now on Monday he ends up pitching in, what is almost like pseudo garbage time? The Nats are down. It never really felt like they were going to come back to win this game, and so you throw Finnegan out there for a top of the ninth inning just because he hasn't pitched in a while. Like, that's not the way this is supposed to go. If Finnegan is one of your top two relievers, and like we keep saying, there are no guarantees with Finnegan. He's not having a very good season. But if, in fact, you view your bullpen hierarchy as Hunter Harvey 1, Kyle Finnegan 2, it doesn't look so good when Chad Kuhl and even Jordan Weems, who is pitching well, are pitching so much more than those two guys, Harvey and Finnegan. And so I think that's the conversation that Davey Martinez needs to have with himself. Do I need to approach this a little differently? Again, understanding that bullpen deployment is tricky. This Nats bullpen overall isn't good. You can second guess everything with the bullpens. Like, it's not supposed to be like this, that Chad Kuhl pitches as often as he has. Chad Kuhl is not Tyler Clippard, and yet he has been used like Tyler Clippard, it feels like, over these last few days.
Right. And this is, you can't win, you can't lose. There's like no good answer to this one. You can throw those guys, try to keep the game close, maybe have a chance at winning. But then if the next two nights they are in a position to win, and then you get to the series finale, you say, well, wait a minute, Finnegan and Harvey are both down tonight because they pitched two in a row. Who's going to close for us? So it's a catch-22. I feel for managers because it's not easy to do this. You're considering both what's happening in the moment, but you're also considering what could happen in the days to come. But you're right. You get to the end of that and you say, why is pitcher X throwing so much more than pitcher Y when pitcher Y is our better guy? Now, it's a reflection of the fact that they're losing these games. If they were in a position to win, it would be different. So that, has to be taken into consideration as part of this. But yeah, we're kind of at a point now where you get to Tuesday night, and I'm guessing Hunter Harvey's pitching no matter what. Whether they're ahead by a bunch, tied, or trailing by a bunch, he needs to pitch now, which is a funny thing to think, given that not that long ago, he couldn't pitch at all because he'd been used so much.
You tell us what you think. Hit us up on Twitter at @Nats_chat. You can email the podcast to natschatpodcast@gmail.com, including if you would like to sponsor the show. We'd love to have you on board. Hit up Tim Shover, see what we can do for you. That email address again is natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a new website. You can check that out, natschatpodcast.com. You can order yourself a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt at that site. Again, natschatpodcast.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. A thank you to Tim Newmark for the Nats Chat podcast music. Visit timnewmark.com. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast. And we send you now to our own Tim Shovers, his conversation with the great Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum.
Hello and welcome to our third annual interview with Bob Kendrick here on the Nats Chat podcast. Bob is the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum that is located in Kansas City, Missouri. And earlier this season, he took in a game at Nationals Park. Bob, thanks so much for coming on again. Did you enjoy your visit to our ballpark here in D.C.?
Oh, man, I always do. I had a great time. One of my board members invited me out to watch a game with him and a couple of his friends, and had a great opportunity to enjoy a game, which I don't get to do too often because usually when I'm at the ballpark, I'm working. And so this was kind of a rare opportunity to actually sit and just watch a game and eat hot dogs and nachos, just like any other fan would get to do. And I certainly enjoyed it. And it just happened to be that series when Baltimore was in town. And so it was a great night at the ballpark.
You've joined us here on this podcast every Juneteenth episode so far in our brief history here at Nats Chat. We're in season 3. In 2021, join us to discuss Josh Gibson. And last year, we spoke about Ray Brown. This year, we head to the outfield to shine a spotlight on one of the all-time great baseball players many of you have probably never heard of in Oscar Charleston. Bob, what should our listeners know about the great Oscar Charleston?
Well, to take the words of the legendary Buck O'Neil, who said without hesitation that Oscar Charleston was the greatest baseball player he had ever seen. That is tremendously high praise. Oscar Charleston is standing in center field here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum on our field of legends. And Buck O'Neil and other Negro leaguers that I've gotten to meet who saw Charleston play, they all say that he was Willie Mays before we ever knew who Willie Mays was. And Buck would go on to say the closest thing to Oscar Charleston would have been Willie Mays. And man, that is frightening because most regard Willie Mays as having been the greatest all-around major leaguer that this game has ever seen. And to think that there might have been a ball player that was even better than Willie Mays is absolutely frightening, but that is what many of the old former Negro League stars would say of the legendary Oscar Charleston.
Why hasn't his name stood the test of time in the same way that Josh Gibson's has?
Well, Gibson was so almost mythical-like in his power. So there are a few names that are transcending in our sport. Satchel Paige, Kuhl Papa Bell, Josh Gibson. Most baseball fans have likely heard those names. And Tim, even if you don't know how great they were, you've likely heard those names. But a name like Oscar Charleston surprises people because he is not a household name like the Satchel Paiges and the Josh Gibsons and the Kuhl Papa Bells of the world. But man, he should be. And by all accounts, there was absolutely nothing that Oscar Charleston could not do. He was a five-tool guy, hit for power, hit for average, could field, could run, could throw. In 1921, he led the Negro Leagues in home runs, triples, stolen bases, batting average, all in the same season. Oh, and I forgot doubles. Yeah, he led in all of those categories in the same season. I mean, as baseball fans, we miss this phenom. And that's the sad reality of what segregation did to our sport. We should have seen all of these great ball players take the field and compete against one another. You know, if you were going to compare Oscar Charleston to a major league contemporary, he had the defensive abilities of Tris Speaker, the tenacity of Ty Cobb. Yeah, he would fight you now. Now, usually Oscar wouldn't start the fight, but Tim, he would finish the fight. Yeah, and the power of Babe Ruth rolled into one dynamic package, and Buck O'Neil says he never saw a center fielder who could go back on a ball the way Charleston could, including the great Willie Mays. Yeah, he said he just seemed to have this uncanny instinct for where the ball was coming down right off the crack of the bat. I tell people all the time, you remember the great catch that Willie Mays makes in the World Series, that great running over-the-shoulder basket catch? And honestly, the throw was better than the catch. But because of the magnitude of the moment, that's the World Series, and he literally had to run a country mile. You know, that's going to be a home run in virtually every other ballpark except the Polo Grounds. But all the old timers say, had that been Oscar Charleston, Tim, he would have been waiting for that ball to come down.
What you mentioned with Willie Mays, that, when I first learned of his name, that was the thing that really struck me was Willie Mays before Willie Mays, because my father grew up in the 50s. He always said Willie Mays, best player ever. Most people from that generation say that, and without argument. So my question to you is, Bob, when you're with some friends and you're sitting around in Kansas City and you start talking about Negro Leagues off air, and let's say you get to the conversation of who the best player is in Negro League history, where is Oscar Charleston in that conversation? Is he at the very, very, very short list, or is he number one, or is it Gibson, or is it someone else?
Ooh, you could throw their names in a bag and pull one out and you would not be wrong. When I look at Josh Gibson, for me, Josh Gibson was a five-tool catcher, if there's any such thing. Because Gibson could do everything as well. And he was playing the most challenging defensive position in the sport. And yet he lit everybody up. The center fielder position is that glamour position, however. That's the position that everybody seems to gravitate to. You play center field. That's why so many people believe that Mays was better than Henry Aaron. Now, I'm to the contrary because Henry Aaron is my all-time favorite baseball player and my childhood idol. But he played a corner outfield, so it's just assumed that he wasn't as good defensively as Willie Mays was. Hank Aaron was a student of this game, and he knew how to play defense as well as anyone. Oscar Charleston was just such a tremendous talent who could beat you every way in which you could be beaten. You know, he could beat you with his bat, with his arm, with his glove, with his legs. And so he was an extraordinary talent. I still think Gibson is number one for me, but Charleston would likely be number two. Yeah, Charleston was pretty special by all accounts.
Charleston, 364 career batting average. I'll say that again, 364 career batting average. When you look at Charleston's bio and his scorecard, you see a lot of different teams in a lot of different cities, starting with Indianapolis in the 1915, and then played all the way with the Philadelphia Stars in 1941, in between a bunch of stops, including with the Homestead Grays, but while they were still in Pennsylvania before they moved down to the capital region. Is there a reason why he bounced around to so many teams, or is that sort of just how the business worked at the time?
Yeah, it was pretty common. Only a handful of players that didn't bounce around. You went with the money. You tried to get the best opportunities that you could get. And Oscar Charleston, Tim, in my opinion, was one of the first two superstars of the newly formed Negro National League when it was established here in Kansas City in 1920. Oscar Charleston and the great Wilbur Bullet Rogan, to me, were the two superstars amongst a litany of stars that were part of the new Negro National League. And in 2020, we put a new headstone on the gravesite of Oscar Charleston because it started there for him with the Indianapolis ABCs. But he was absolutely well-traveled, and not only in the Negro Leagues, but our scrapbook, we have his scrapbook, and most of the stuff documented in his scrapbook comes from when he was playing in Cuba. And he was a big star in Cuba. As many of these guys went to Spanish-speaking countries and had great careers playing in those countries, Oscar Charleston was no exception. You see these cartoons and they're all in Spanish, and you see the dramatization of Oscar Charleston carrying that big bat, almost a bat the size of something that you might see on the Flintstones, because he was that revered while he was playing in Cuba. And so he was indeed well-traveled. But you went with where the money was. And again, he was such an extraordinary talent that a lot of people wanted him to play. And so he goes from the Indianapolis ABCs, goes over briefly to join the team in St. Louis. That's the year in 1921 when he puts up that season where he led the Negro Leagues in home runs, triples, doubles, stolen bases, and batting average. I don't know if we'll ever see that done again.
No.
And then he was only one season with St. Louis. He was gone. Just as fast as he came there and put up these almost video game-like numbers, he was out of there.
Oscar passed away in October of 1954 at the age of 57 due to what is described as either a heart attack or a stroke. He passed away in Philadelphia. He's now buried today in Indianapolis. But last thing for you, Bob, today, to tie this to Jackie Robinson, is that Oscar in the mid-40s was briefly hired as the manager of the Brooklyn Brown Dodgers. Now, this was before Jackie Robinson joined the Brooklyn Dodgers. Can you educate our listeners as to the backstory of that organization and what that all was right before the sport integrated?
Well, Branch Rickey had purported to be creating his own version of a Negro Leagues. Honestly, Tim, I think it was a smokescreen so that he could start to recruit African-American ball players without the other major league owners really knowing what he was doing. So Charleston was working for Rickey, and he was scouting for Rickey, essentially. And ultimately, that gets us to Kansas City, and Jackie being plucked away from the Kansas City Monarchs, because contrary to popular belief, Branch Rickey did not sign Jackie away from the Kansas City Monarchs. Tim, he took Jackie away from the Kansas City Monarchs. J.O. Wilkinson, who owned the Monarchs, never got paid, as my late mother would say, not one red cent for a ball player who was absolutely under contract But Ricky was very shrewd. And Ricky knew that the Monarchs owner could not fight back. You know why? Because he was white. J.L. Wilkinson was a white man who made his entire living in black baseball. So you think about this. There is no way that this white man, who, as I said, made his entire living in black baseball, can be the public face of trying to block what every black person in America had been waiting for a black man to play in the major leagues. If he does, that fan base, that Monarch fan base that had been so loyal to him, they would have turned their backs on him right away. And Ricky knew this. And so he had Wilkie stuck between, as I like to say, that proverbial rock and hard place. And so publicly, Wilkie said all the right things. Privately, man, he was seething, but he wasn't seething because a black man's about to play in the major leagues. This black man that you're about to take away from me, you're going to put me out of business. And he was absolutely right. And so Charleston was doing some of the scouting for Ricky with this Brooklyn Brown Dodger team that really never really existed in any real meaningful way. I do think it was much of a farce and a smokescreen to keep the other owners off of his scent as he was trying to make this calculated move to bring black talent into Major League Baseball. His first choice was Monty Irvin and not Jackie Robinson. But the Newark Eagles owner was a woman by the name of Effa Manley. And she fought Ricky. She scared Ricky off of Monty Irvin. And that's when he turns his sight here to Kansas City because Mrs. Manley threatened to litigate against Ricky. And he knew he couldn't have a public fight with this black woman. And at a time when you already know the owners are going to stand in solidarity to try and block your move anyway. So he backs off of Monty Irvin, and that's when he turns his sight here to Kansas City to one Jackie Roosevelt Robinson.
Thank you so much for telling me that fact. Our listeners will really appreciate it. We go inside baseball here in the Nats Chat podcast, and we just went really inside. We gave you mid-40s business dealings that led to Jackie Robinson.
Tim, it's fascinating. I tell people all the time, man, you could do a scripted TV series on how we got to Jackie Robinson. It is that fascinating, and it's filled with intrigue and mystery, and you don't know who to believe. The owners were posturing everybody. So it is absolutely fascinating, and Charleston found himself right in the middle of that, working for Ricky.
Well, when you go to L.A. to shop it to Hulu and Netflix, I'll happily be there with you in the room if need be. So, well, Bob, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for telling us about Oscar Charleston, just one of the all-time great legends in the history of the sport, and more people should know about him. And thank you for doing your part here today, and of course with the museum. And cannot wait till the day where I finally get to go to the museum.
Well, I'm looking forward to welcoming you here to the museum, and thanks again for giving me kind of a platform to talk about heroes like the great Oscar Charleston.